Alright, y'all, I'm just gonna document some dead trees. There's a dead tree over here. I'm kind of just driving through Pasadena right now. Dead tree. Passing a tree farm. Doesn't look like much is going on there. Dead tree. Tree with a lot of dead leaves on it. And I see some very struggling trees back there. Almost dead tree. That tree is gone. This tree is about to go. All right. This goes on and on all the way through LA. This tree right here, looking in bad shape. These trees losing a lot of leaves. These trees losing a lot of leaves. This tree dead. This tree looking really bad. I mean, it's insane. I could just do this all day. I could just take pictures of dead trees all day in Los Angeles. I don't know how people aren't noticing this who live here. Dead tree. Dead tree. Dead tree. Dying pine trees. Dead tree here. Dead tree. This is Del Mar Avenue in Pasadena, California. Or Del Mar Boulevard, excuse me. Dead tree. Dead tree. Dying tree. Just taking you through the Arroyo. This is in Pasadena. This tree is half dead. This tree is on, a lot of the leaves are off and it looks in bad shape. So this is I'm trying to get a closer view of what's going on, but you can just see, in the trees there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see still some leaves on some of these trees, but I'm going to say like 50% of the trees in Los Angeles are dying, are in the process of dying. This tree, dead. The tree next to it, on the way to being dead. Across the street here, dead leaves. Again, this tree is on its way out. Right here across this embankment here, the freeway, it's like 50% dead. All the way along here, all of this, 50% dead. Across the way, 50% dead. For many, many yellow trees. We're at the skate park where my son and I used to go years ago. Right there. Just dead bush, dead brush, dead trees. This tree, half yellow. Most of the green is coming off the trees. Another little stretch here, dead. 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 There's actually like looks like some brush or leaf equipment here, or tree equipment. Maybe they're getting ready to take some of these things out. Dead, half dead trees. Half dead trees, all the way dead. All the way dead, pretty much. These trees are almost gone. There's a few green leaves left, but they're not going to make it. We're going to need a serious rain this winter, or there's more half dead tree across the street. Look, if you can see up on that hill, this is what a lot of the hillside looks like. This is like, look at those trees. They look like they've been burnt in a fire, but they are not burnt in a fire. They've lost all their leaves and they are dead. If we don't have a serious rain this winter, things are going to look really scary. So they are clearing out these bushes here. It looks like they have been doing some work trying to get these trees out. Just piles of like debris. Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News. And as you can see, lots of damage to the trees in Los Angeles. I could spend an entire day just documenting all the dead trees. It's worse in many places than what I'm showing you. All of that footage was taken within a very short space or a small space. So all those trees are close together. That's not like random dead trees in LA. That's like in the space of like a block or two. Dead trees after dead trees after dead trees. That is the reality of what is going on. What the actual cause is, who knows? Again, I think it's multiple things: heat, stress, probably UV. The sun is definitely hotter. Lots of people report that the sun feels hotter. That could be damaging foliage as well. Who knows? The rate of climate change could be too much for the plants to keep up with. I think it's all of those things. But I'm going to just keep, taking pictures of it and keep my eye on it. It's not pretty. It does not bode well. Let's move on to some news. Where are we? Hurricane Florence is obviously tracking to hit north/South Carolina or South North Carolina. Or more than 1 million to flee as Hurricane Florence rips toward East Coast. Hurricane Florence is plowing towards the East Coast as a Category 4 storm with a 500-mile wingspan, forcing dire warnings and mandatory evacuations, including the entire coastline of South Carolina and parts of Virginia and North Carolina. In South Carolina alone, more than 1 million residents and tourists are expected to flee from coastal areas. Governor Henry McMaster said Monday, vowing that state officials are not going to gamble with people's lives. The National Hurricane Center said, Don't do that, USA Today. Stop it. Hey. The National Hurricane Center said Florence was expected to slam into the coast around North and South Carolina as a Category 3 or 4 hurricane on Thursday or Friday. Storms and winds had increased to 140 miles per hour by Monday. The hurricane roared from Category 1 to Category 4 in just 13 hours, an extremely rapid intensification. Colorado State University meteorologist Phil Klotzbach said the last Atlantic hurricane to do so, to intensify as rapidly as far north as Florence's current location was Hurricane Umberto in 2007. As of Monday evening, Florence was 500 miles in diameter, much larger than the typical 300-mile wide hurricane. While larger than Katrina, which was 415 miles wide, it still has a ways to go to reach the record width of 1,000 miles from Hurricane Sandy in 2012. I did not know that. Moving along, there are other storms. A brewing. Hurricane Isaac is behind Florence in the Atlantic. Smaller hurricane weakening is forecast to begin by the middle of the week. Winds of tropical storm force could reach Puerto Rico on Thursday evening. There is also Hurricane Helene, still closer to Africa than North America. Helene is predicted to head north in the Atlantic and not make landfall. Sustained winds were 105 miles per hour. Some strengthening is possible during the next 12 to 24 hours. And then there's Tropical Storm Olivia in the Pacific. The storm is still moving toward Hawaii, where tropical storm warnings and watches have been issued, the Hurricane Center said. Tropical storm warning means that tropical storm conditions are expected somewhere in the warning area within 36 hours and a watch within 48 hours. Maximum sustained winds were about 70 miles per hour Monday afternoon. The storm was downgraded from Category 1 hurricane, the Hurricane Center said. Please keep in mind that the difference between a Cat 1 and a TS is only 5 miles per hour, the National Weather Service office said in Honolulu. Threat of damaging winds, flooding rain, high surf, and storm surge still remain. No change to watches, warnings, don't let your guards down. So we're keeping our eyes on this, on that, on this and that. The red tide is still a thing in Florida, and I guess I don't know if it's worsening, staying the same. It seems to be not improving, of course. Toxic red tide algae moves north toward Tampa Bay, killing hundreds of thousands of fish. This is from today. The toxic algae bloom that has carved a trail of dead animals and triggered a putrid stench along western Florida's coastline has drifted further north, killing hundreds of thousands of fish in the Tampa Bay region. The legions of dead fish were reported in a 20-mile stretch of coastline near Clearwater to St. Petersburg. Environmental officials with Pinellas County told the Tampa Bay Times on Saturday. County workers roamed beaches and trawled offshore to collect the fish carcasses to head off decomposition as some beachgoers turned back. Rotting fish and the strong odor of the algae has previously repelled locals and imperiled Florida's vital tourism sector for much of the summer. The toxic algae has claimed countless fish, hundreds of sea turtles, dozens of bottlenose dolphins, and even a 26-foot whale shark in the past few months. The toxic algae stretches in varied density for about 120 miles of coastline, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission said. In August, Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency and released funds to help with the massive cleanup effort and help businesses recover from lost profits. The algae has affected the coast in some way for 10 months and has become a key political issue in the midterms for Scott, a U.S. Senate hopeful. The red tide is a natural phenomenon that develops miles offshore before making its way to the coast, where it feeds on a variety of pollutants, including phosphorus and nitrogen from fertilizer, along with other runoff and wastewater. The toxins can aerosolize in the wind that drifts ashore, triggering respiratory problems or worsening conditions such as asthma. What is not clear is whether climate change and pollution from humans near the shore has made this outbreak severe and prolonged. Scientists have found that the algae thrive in warmer waters and increase carbon dioxide levels. Yeah, until this past week, excuse me. Until this past week, the red tide lurked south of Tampa Bay, the Times reported. Samples of high concentration of the algae have been found in waters near Clearwater Beach in the past few days. Sudden approach of the algal bloom and dead fish washing ashore surprised beachgoers on Saturday. Andres and Veronica Bernal told the Times they had checked county websites for alerts before leaving Tampa in the afternoon. Our two children were horrified to see dead fish littered on the beach. They opted to play in the sand instead as the smell of rotting fish lingered. Scientists are trying to figure out why. Why, oh, why exactly the current red tide along the Gulf Coast has been so protracted and deadly to wildlife. State officials and scientists point out that at base, this is a natural phenomenon, but fish die-offs were noted by Spanish explorers in the 1500s and have been well documented since the 1840s. Sure, this is just a natural phenomenon. Keep on believing that at your own peril. Let's move on to something from Truth Out. I believe this is from today. What are coastal nuclear power plants doing to address climate threats? Let's find out. The outer defensive wall of what is expected to be the world's most expensive nuclear power station is taking shape on the shoreline of the choppy gray waters of the Bristol Channel in western England. Oh, joy. By the time the U.S. $25 billion Hinkley Point C nuclear station is finished, possibly in 2028, the concrete seawall will be 12.5 meters high, 900 meters long, and durable enough, the UK regulator and French engineers say, to withstand the strongest storm surge, the greatest tsunami, and the highest sea level rise. But will it? Independent nuclear consultant Pete Roche, a former advisor to the UK government and Greenpeace, points out that the tidal range along this stretch of coast is one of the highest in the world and that erosion is heavy. Indeed, observers reported serious flooding on the site in 1981 when an earlier nuclear power station had to be shut down for a week following a spring tide and a storm surge. However well built, says Roche, the new seawall does not adequately take into account sea level rise due to climate change. Of course it doesn't. The wall is strong, but the plans were drawn up in 2012 before the increasing volume of melting of the Greenland ice cap was properly understood, and when most experts thought there was no net melting in the Antarctic, he says. Now estimates of sea level rise in the next 50 years have gone up from less than 30 centimeters to more than a meter, well within the operating lifespan of Hinkley Point C. Oh, joy. Dread and double dread, or drat and double drat, let alone in 100 years' time when the reactors are finally decommissioned, or the even longer period when spent nuclear fuel is likely to be stored on site. In fact, research by ENSIA suggests that at least 100 US, European, and Asian nuclear power stations built just a few meters above sea level could be threatened by serious flooding caused by accelerating sea level rise and more frequent storm surges. Some efforts are underway to prepare for increased flooding risk in the future, but a number of scientific papers published in 2018 suggest that climate change will impact coastal nuclear plants earlier and harder than the industry, governments, or regulatory bodies have expected, and that the safety standards set by the national nuclear regulators and the United Nations nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, are out of date and take insufficient account of the effects of climate change on nuclear power. Of course they do. Don't forget that the water is getting warmer, so they can't actually use it to cool the rods. The flooding can be catastrophic to a nuclear power plant because it can knock out its electrical systems, disabling its cooling mechanisms and leading to overheating, a possible meltdown, and a dangerous release of radioactivity. Flooding at the Fukushima Daiichi plant in Japan as a result of the March 2011 tsunami caused severe damage to several of the plant's reactors and only narrowly avoided a catastrophic release of radioactivity, could have forced the evacuation of 50 million people. The interactive map above from Carbon Brief shows the location of nuclear power plants around the world. According to maps prepared by the World Association of Nuclear Operators, around 1 in 4 of the world's 460 working commercial nuclear reactors are situated on coastlines. Many were built only 10 to 20 meters above sea level at a time when climate change was barely considered a threat. In the US, where 9 nuclear plants are within 2 miles of the ocean and 4 reactors have been identified by Stanford academics as vulnerable to storm surges and sea level rise, flooding is common, says David Lochbaum, a former nuclear engineer and director of the Nuclear Safety Project at the Union of Concerned Scientists. Lochbaum says over 20 flooding incidents have been recorded at U.S. nuclear plants since the early 1980s. The most likely cause of flooding is the increasing frequency of extreme events. And there are a couple of reactors in the way of Hurricane Florence, I believe. There was no consideration of climate change when most U.S. plants were built, said Natalie Kopitko, a University of Leeds researcher who has studied nuclear power plant adaptations to climate change. They used conservative models of historical reference. Also, they were largely built at a calm period when there were not so many major storms. While an accident has never yet happened due solely to sea level rise and storms, the flooding experienced at Fukushima resembles what could occur in the future from sea level rise, said Kopitko. The IEAE's current global safety standards were published in 2011. These state that operators should only take into account the 18 to 59 centimeter sea level rise projected by 2100 in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That is still just insane, though. I mean, they were building these reactors like knowing it was going to happen anyways. It was just a little farther off. How did they think that they were going to, keep operating these plants or decommission them? Like that. This is insane. This is just straight up insanity. I hate that we're doing this. I just don't even know. This is just progress at its absolute flat out I don't know what to call it. I mean, it's beyond stupid. It's beyond insane. It's just willfully destructive. And just the idea that this is going to end well or be okay. Anyways, I'm going to stop reading that article because I'm about to lose my shit. I'm going to end with this. And this goes to the discussion of how much time do we have, not just to turn anything around, but how much time do we expect to have, period. How much time do we have to enjoy normalcy, the regular world, the world as we know it. This is titled Human Extinction by 2026 by Robert J. Burrows from Dissident Voice. This is from September 3rd. There is almost unanimous agreement among climate scientists and organizations, that is, 97% of over 10,000 climate scientists, and the various scientific organizations engaged in climate science research, that human beings have caused a dramatic increase in the amount of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide released into the Earth's atmosphere since the pre-industrial era, and that this is driving the climate catastrophe that continues to unfold. However, there is no consensus regarding the time frame in which this climate catastrophe will cause human extinction. This lack of consensus is primarily due to the global elite controlling the public perception of this time frame with frequent talk of the end of the century designed to allow ongoing profit maximization through business as usual for as long as possible. Why has this happened? When evidence of the climate catastrophe, including the pivotal role of burning fossil fuels, becomes incontrovertible, which meant that the fossil fuel industry's longstanding efforts to prevent action on the climate catastrophe had finally ended, the industry shifted its focus to arguing that the time frame which it presented as end of the century meant that we could defer action and thus Profit maximization through business as usual could continue indefinitely. Consequently, like the tobacco, sugar, and junk food industries, the fossil fuel industry has employed a range of tactics to deflect attention from their primary responsibility for a problem and to delay action on it. These well-worn tactics include suggesting that the research is incomplete and more research needs to be done, funding research to come up with evidence to counter the climate science, employing scholars to present this research, quote unquote, discrediting honest climate scientists, infiltrating regulatory bodies to water down or reverse decisions and recommendations that would adversely impact profits. See the Paris Climate Agreement. Setting up concerned groups to act as fronts for the industry, making generous political donations to individuals and political parties, as well as employing lobbyists. As a result of its enormous power, too, the global elite has been able to control much of the funding available for climate science research and a great deal of the information about it that is made widely available to the public, particularly through its corporate media. For this reason, the elite wields enormous power to shape the dialogue in relation to both the climate science and the time frame. Therefore, and despite the overwhelming consensus noted above, many climate scientists are reluctant to be fully truthful about the state of the world's climate, or they are just conservative in their assessments of the climate catastrophe. For example, eminent climate scientist Professor James Hansen referred to the scientific reticence in this article, scientific reticence to sea level rise. Scientists might be conservative in their research. For example, dependence upon historical records leads to missing about 1/5 of global warming since the 1860s, as explained in reconciled climate response estimates from global models and the energy budget of Earth. And in some cases, governments muzzle scientists outright, but many of the forces working against full exposure of the truth are explained in Professor Guy McPherson's article, Climate Change Summary and Update. However, in contrast to the elite-managed mainstream narrative regarding the climate time frame, there is a group of courageous and prominent climate scientists who offer compelling climate science evidence that human beings, along with millions of other species, will be extinct by 2026 and perhaps as early as 2021. In response to a projected 10 degrees Celsius increase in global temperatures above the pre-industrial level by that date. Before outlining the essence of this article, it is worth noting that the website on which it is posted is Arctic News, and the editors of the site post vital articles on the world's climate by highly prominent climate scientists such as Professor Peter Wadhams, Dr. Andrew Glickson, Professor Guy McPherson, who has written extensively in lectures all over the world on the subject, and Sam Carana, a pseudonym used by a group of climate scientists concerned to avoid too many adverse impacts on their research, careers, and funding by declaring themselves publicly but nevertheless committed to making the truth available for those who seek it. So in a few brief points, let me summarize the evidence and argument outlined in the article, Will Humans Be Extinct by 2026? The Climate Science of Destruction of the Biosphere. This is a long article, y'all, so strap in. In the Arctic, there's a vast amount of carbon stored in soils that is now largely frozen. This frozen soil is called permafrost. But as Arctic temperatures continue to rise and permafrost thaws in response to the warming that has already occurred and is ongoing by burning fossil fuels and farming animals for human consumption, much of this carbon will be converted into carbon dioxide or methane and released into the atmosphere. There is also a vast amount of methane in the form of methane hydrates and free gas stored in sediments under the Arctic Ocean seafloor. As temperatures rise, these sediments are being destabilized and will soon result in massive eruptions of methane from the ocean floor. Due to the abrupt character of such releases and the fact that many seas in the Arctic Ocean are shallow, much of the methane will then enter the atmosphere without getting broken down in the water, adversely impacting the circumstances in that the sea ice continues to retreat as the polar ice cap melts in response to the ongoing temperature increases, because sea ice reflects sunlight back into space, and as the ice retreats, more sunlight hits the dark-colored ocean, which absorbs the sunlight and warms the ocean even more. This causes even more ice melt in what becomes an ongoing self-reinforcing feedback loop that ultimately impacts worldwide, such as triggering huge firestorms in forests and peatlands in North America and Russia. More importantly, however, without sea ice, storms develop more easily, and because they mix warm surface waters with colder water at the bottom of the shallow seas, reaching cracks and sediments filled with ice, which acts as glue, holding the sediment together. The ice melt destabilizes the sediments, which are vulnerable to even small differences in temperature and pressure that are triggered by earthquakes, undersea landslides, or changes in ocean currents. As a result, huge amounts of methane can erupt from the seafloor of the Arctic Ocean, and once this occurs, it will further raise temperatures, especially over the Arctic, thus acting as another self-reinforcing feedback loop that again makes the situation even worse in the Arctic, with higher temperatures causing even further methane releases, contributing to the vicious cycle that precipitates runaway global warming. These developments can take place at such a speed that adaptation will be futile. More extreme weather events, can you say the trees in Los Angeles, they cannot adapt to the change in the climate. That's why they are dying. The climate is changing too fast. More extreme weather events can hit the same area with a succession of droughts, cold snaps, floods, heat waves, and wildfires that follow each other up rapidly. Within just one decade, from 2016, the combined impact of extreme weather, falls in soil quality and air quality, habitat loss, and shortages of food, water, shelter, and just about all the basic things needed to sustain life can threaten most, if not all, life on Earth with extinction. The article goes on to outline how the 10-degree increase above the pre-industrial level by 2026 is likely to occur. It will involve further carbon dioxide and methane releases from human activity, particularly driving cars and other vehicles, flying in aircraft, and eating animal products, as well as military violence. Ongoing reduction of snow and ice cover around the world, thus reflecting less sunlight back into space. An increase in the amount of water vapor, a greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, a falling away of aerosol masking, which has helped reduce the impact of emissions so far, as emissions decline, as well as methane eruptions from the ocean floor. If you would like to read more about this and see the graphs and substantial documentation, you could do so in this article cited above, Will Humans Be Extinct by 2026? The Ecology of Destruction of the Biosphere. Not that all these scientists who focus on the climate discuss it, but there are other human activities adversely impacting Earth's biosphere which also threaten near-term extinction for humans, particularly given their synergistic impacts. For example, recent research has drawn attention to the fact that the alarming loss of insects will likely take down humanity before global warming hits maximum velocity. The worldwide loss of insects is simply staggering, with some reports of 75% up to 90%, happening much faster than the paleoclimate record rate of the past 5 major extinction events. Without insects burrowing, forming new soil, aerating soil, pollinating food crops, and providing food for many bird species, the biosphere simply collapses. Moreover, apart from ongoing destruction of other vital components of Earth's life support systems, such as the rainforest, currently being destroyed at the rate of 80,000 acres each day, and oceans, which is generating an extinction rate of 200 species, plants, birds, animals, fish, amphibians, insects, and reptiles each day, with another 26,000 species already identified as under threat. Some prominent scholars have explained how even these figures mask a vital component of the rapidly accelerating catastrophe of species extinctions, the demise of local populations of species. In addition, relying on our ignorance and our complicity, elites kill vast areas of Earth's biosphere through war and other military violence, subject it to uncontrolled releases of radioactive contamination, and use geoengineering to wage war on Earth's climate, environment, and ultimately ourselves. Separately from all of this, we live under the unending threat of nuclear war. This is because insane political and corporate elites are still authorizing and manufacturing more of these highly profitable weapons rather than dismantling them all, as well as conventional weapons, and redirecting the vast resources devoted to ongoing military killing in the US $1.7 trillion annually to environmental restoration and programs of social uplift. By the way, if you think the risk of nuclear war can be ignored, you might find this recent observation sobering. In a review, Daniel Ellsberg's recent book, The Doomsday Machine, Confessions of a Nuclear War Planner, Earth and climate scientist Dr. Andrew Glickson summarized the book as follows. This, then, is the doomsday machine, not simply the existence of fission weapons or unspeakable destructive hydrogen bombs, but the whole network rigged together, thousands of them on hair-trigger alert, command and control equipment built in the 1970s and 80s, millions of lines of antique code sitting on reels of magnetic tape or shuffled around on floppy disks even now, an architecture tended by fallible and deeply institutionalized human beings. So irrespective of whether elites or their agents, or even we acknowledge it, Earth's biosphere is under siege on many fronts, and very soon now, Earth will not support life. Any honest news source routinely reports one or another aspect of the way in which humans are destroying the Earth, and perhaps suggests courses of action to respond powerfully to it. This, of course, does not include the insane global elites corporate media, which functions to distract us from any semblance of the truth. How did all this happen? How did human beings end up in the situation that human extinction is likely to occur within 8 years, even assuming we can avert nuclear war? And is there any prospect of doing enough about it now to avert this extinction? To answer this first question briefly, we arrived at this juncture in our history because of a long sequence of decisions essentially made by elites to expand their profit, power, and privilege, and which they then imposed on us, and which we did not resist powerfully enough. In any case, the key questions now are simply these. Is it too late to avert our own extinction? And if not, what must we do? While I'm not going to dwell on it, but some scientists believe it is too late, we have already passed the point of no return. Professor Guy McPherson is one of these scientists, with a comprehensive explanation of a great deal of evidence to support it in his long and heavily documented article, Climate Change Summary and Update. So the fundamental question is this: if we assume highly problematically, I acknowledge, that it is possible to avert our own extinction by 2026, what must we do? Because we need to address in a strategic manner the interrelated underlying causes that are driving the rush to extinction. Let me first identify one important symptom of these underlying causes, and then the underlying structural and behavioral causes themselves. Finally, let me invite your participation in one or more aspects of comprehensive strategy designed to address all of this, as in the past. At least initially, the vast bulk of the human population is not going to respond to this crisis in any way. We need to be aware of this, but not let it get in our way. There is a straightforward explanation for it. Fear, or far more accurately, unconscious terror, will ensure that the bulk of the human population will not investigate or seriously consider the scientific evidence in relation to the ongoing climate catastrophe, despite its implications for them personally and humanity generally, not to mention other species in the biosphere. Moreover, given that climate science is not an easy subject to grapple with, elite control of most media in relation to it, including most of the time by simply excluding mention of key learning from the climate scientists, ensures that public awareness, while reasonably high, is not matched by knowledge, which is negligible. As a result, most people will fearfully, unintelligently, and powerlessly accept the delusions, distractions, and denial that are promulgated by the insane global elite through its various propaganda channels, including the corporate media, public relations, and entertainment industries, as well as educational institutions. This propaganda always includes the implicit message that people can't and shouldn't do anything in response to the climate catastrophe, invariably and inaccurately, benignly described as climate change. A primary way in which the corporate media reports the issue but frames it for a powerless response is to simply distribute news about each climate-related event without connecting it either with other climate-related events or even mentioning it as yet another symptom of the climate catastrophe. Even if they do mention these connections, they reliably mention distant dates for phenomena like heat waves, repeating themselves in an overall end-of-century time frame to preclude the likelihood that any sense of urgency will arise. The net outcome of all of this, as I stated above, is the bulk of human population will not respond to the crisis in the short term, as it hasn't so far, with most of what limited response there is combined to powerless lobbying, elite-controlled governments. However, as long as you consider responding, and by responding I mean responding strategically, and then do respond, you become a powerful agent of change, including by recruiting others through your example. But before I present the strategy, let me identify the major structural and behavioral causes that are driving the climate catastrophe and destruction of the biosphere, and explain why some key elements of the strategy are focused on tackling these underlying causes. The political economy of destruction in the biosphere. The global elite ensures that it has political control of the biosphere as well as space by using various systems, structures, and processes that it largely created over the past few centuries and now controls, including the major institutions of governance in the world, such as national governments, key international organizations like the United Nations. It does this, for example, so that it can economically utilize via the exploitive mechanisms of capitalism and its corporations, which the elite also created, domains of the biosphere rich in resources, particularly fossil fuels, strategic minerals, and fresh water. The elite will use any means, including psychological manipulation, propaganda issued by its corporate media, national education institutions, legal systems, and extraordinary military violence to achieve this outcome, whatever the cost of life on Earth. In short, the global elite is so insane that its members believe that killing and exploiting fellow human beings and destroying the biosphere are simply good ways to make profit. Of course, they do not perceive us as fellow human beings. They perceive and treat us as a great deal less. You know, I just had this flash of possibly insight about why people hate Trump so much, because he kind of embodies, he's like the embodiment of psychopathic capitalism, of just, you know what I mean? Just runaway pursuit of riches and power at any cost, at any cost of the biosphere or other human beings. And it's not so much that Trump is the bad person. He embodies what we all have become, communally, right? We all are part of this system. We all are at fault. We are all, so it's not just, you know what I'm saying? He's taking on our own hatred of ourselves for us. And that's why people are like, fuck that guy. Just a thought. I don't know. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but because it's not just Trump. That's not saying that doesn't mean that like he gets off the hook. It just means that it's everybody else. It's all of them. It's all of the elite. It's all of the ruling class. It's all the corporations. All of them are all together supporting what is happening. And if you think that they're really against what Trump is doing, ... This is blah, 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 blah. Of course, they do not perceive us fellow human beings. They perceive and treat us as a great deal less. That is why, for example, the elite routinely uses its military forces to attack impoverished and militarily primitive countries so that they can steal their resources. But they are happy to steal from those of us living in Western economies too, with Professor Barbara G. Ellis issuing the latest warning about yet another way this could easily happen. Anyway, because of elite control of governments, it is a waste of time lobbying politicians. We want action on virtually all issues that concern us, particularly the big issues that threaten extinction, such as the climate catastrophe, environmental destruction, and war, especially the threat of nuclear war. While in very limited and usually social contexts, such as issues in relation to the right of women or abortions or rights for LGBTQIA communities, which, when it doesn't significantly adversely impact elite priorities, gains are sometimes made, at least temporarily, by mobilizing sufficient people to pressure politicians. This has two beneficial outcomes for elites. It keeps many people busy on secondary issues from the elite perspective that do not impact elite profit, power, and privilege, and it reinforces the delusion that democracy works. Democrats. That's exactly what is going on on the left and on the Democratic side of the political spectrum, is that we feel like, they're going to make everything better for people, but we're still being slowly killed and sucked dry by corporations. And they won't change that. They will not go against that for you. However, in the contexts that directly impact elite concerns, such as their unbridled exploitation of the biosphere for profit, politicians serve their elite masters even to the extent that any laws that might appear to have been designed to impede elite excesses, such as pollution generated by their activities, and readily ignored if necessary, with legal penalties too insignificant to deter phenomenally wealthy corporations. Of course, if any government does not obey elite directives, it is overthrown. Just ask any independently minded government over the past century for a list of governments overthrown by global elite using its military and intelligence agencies since World War II. See William Blum's book, Killing Hope, U.S. military and CIA interventions since World War II, or for just the list, see Overthrowing Other People's Governments, the master list. How does the elite maintain this control over political, economic, military, legal, and social structures and processes? The Sociology of Destruction of the Biosphere. Ooh, this is a long-ass article. You know what, guys? I just don't have time, and I don't have time. I knew this was long, but I didn't realize how long. So I'm going to have to come back tomorrow and finish this. This is a good article, and I would like to finish it for you and for myself. Where are we? One moment. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna end right here. How does the elite maintain this control over political, economic, military, legal, and social structures and processes? that's all I have for you today. I've got to quit this and go to bed because I have to get up at the crack of dawn tomorrow. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I will be back tomorrow with the rest of this article and probably, and possibly some other items as well. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so with the links below. Until next time, peace.